Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back to The Struggle to Know. My name is Tristan. I am here with some two special guests that we have today. And as we get into this conversation, I'd like to start off by thanking the Cleveland Public Library for allowing us to use some equipment in order to record this episode of The Struggle to Know. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to
Hamzah, Maqbul, inshallah, with you. For those of you who know me, I'm sorry. And for those who don't know me, my name is Hamzah. At any rate, and then we have Sheikh, our distinguished Sheikh Maulana Musa Sugapong, and two special guests, Brother Yayha Abdul Alim Coates and Brother Dawud Muhammad. And we wanted to talk about a couple of important topics that kind of help us reconnect to our spirit as a Muslim community here in America, our spirit which is connected through our forefathers and our ancestors in Iman. It's really important to know about those who came before you. And I think there's a type of kind of like Protestant sensibility that people have, which is like we have a radical disconnect with the past. So there's me, and then there's the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran, and then there's Allah, and to heck with everybody else. But that's not how that works. How it works is like Allah Ta'ala said in His book, you know, that وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ, that the Muhajirin and the Ansar, Allah praises them and then says those who came after them, radiyallahu anhum, يقولون, they say, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ. So, oh Allah, forgive us and forgive those who came before us in Iman. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and don't put in our hearts rancor toward those who believe. رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ, O our Lord, indeed you are kind and indeed you are merciful. And so we got to know who our forefathers are in Iman. And that's, you know, the spirit is something stronger than even blood. And so those of, you know, those of us who have Islam, even if you're somebody who is like a convert to the deen, those who came before you, those people who transmitted that deen to those people before you, we got to know about them in order for ourselves to be spiritually grounded. So inshallah, with that, I wanted to maybe take a moment to ask Brother Yayha first, and then Brother Dawud, or in any order you brothers would like, to maybe introduce yourself a little bit before delving into the specifics of this deen.
Okay. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Yayha Abdul Alim Coates. The Senegalese call me Yayha Gay. That's my adopted Senegalese name, Gay, alhamdulillah. But converted to Islam in 1994, June of 94. So it's been a long time, and seen a lot and experienced a lot. But alhamdulillah, you know, at that time, inshallah, the whole fever for Malcolm X was real popular. You know, the Roots movie came out again for a second time. So that Roots movie.
Brother Denzel reciting the
yeah,
Fatiha.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know how many times I rewatched that scene over and over and over again.
Allahu Akbar.
You know, and then going back and reading the biography of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah. I mean, how do you want to go? You want to go next? This week? I don't know. Bismillah.
That's it?
Okay, well, that's a brief introduction. It's kind of funny, that story, the very first time I picked up that book, I was actually, before I was Muslim, and I was not in the best situation, and we cut school that day, right? Yeah, and we actually, I hid in the library, because we were being chased by some people. So literally hid in the library, and my friends got arrested. And again, at this time I was a Muslim, but I went in the library, and I stumbled across the autobiography of Malcolm X inside that library. The very first time I seen that book, and got to reading it, you know, and it kind of left an impression in me. I was like, this is I need to get my life together. Yeah. So fast forward years later, end up, you know, converting to Islam, and being real close to the Senegalese community. Was able to travel, spend some time in Senegal. Fast forward years later, got married, and alhamdulillah, here taking care of a family of 5 of us, inshallah.
Bro, Dawud?
Yes, my name is Dawud Muhammad. Took my Shahada in 1989, 1990. I remember distinctively it was the summer of that year. And, excuse me, I think, if I remember correctly, it was sometime around getting close to Ramadan. So this was a very new experience for me. But the family that introduced me to Islam was a family who came out of the Nation of Islam, and they were worth dinars. They were Sunnis. A good friend of mine, their dad was an architect at Case Western Reserve, the Muhammad family. Their son is an aerospace engineer. And they were pivotal in my growth, especially hanging around with their son for the first maybe 4 or 5 years, observing the family. And then eventually his son asking me one day, because they told me years later, they were thinking about how they should approach me and give me dawah. So he asked me to go to church, which I knew what he was talking about, right? Is to go to the masajid. So, mashallah, my experiences were really good. First mosque I ever went to was on Detroit. The man who was giving the khutbah at that time was a man named Sheikh Saleh. And lo and behold, I would find out 10 years later, he would introduce me to my wife. So mashallah, Allah bless him and his family.
But you said Detroit Avenue, that the Masjid Rasulullah, where it is now?
The other one, right next, there's a halal store next to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that used to be ICC at that time. If you're talking about 89, 90, right?
It was the
Yes.
Islamic
Okay.
Center.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That was the
yeah.
original site of the Islamic Center of Cleveland before they purchased the land in Carmel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mashallah,
Right.
mashallah. I didn't know that was that location.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Mashallah.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. You know, there's actually a lot of immigrants that go to this particular mosque. It's like a small little
Exactly.
building. Yes. Right. Yeah.
Mashallah.
That was it. That's the first mosque I went to.
You're like, why are we going to church on Friday?
Yes. I knew what he meant. I just smiled when he mentioned it because I said, yeah, okay, I know what he's doing. But I was open. And that time period was a time period that was really, I think, intellectually charged, 89, 90. A city, Yayha mentioned the movie Malcolm X was coming out in 1991. And also the music. At that time, I was listening to socially conscious hip-hop music, right? And all of that music
The best kind
was
of hip-hop.
intellectual, right? KRS-One was a particular rapper that reverberated with me because he constantly kept me going back and forth to the library and researching some of the things he was rapping about.
Wow.
So for me, Islam represented an intellectual journey, right?
Which is, mashallah, for those of you who heard the last podcast, it's a very interesting counterpoint to one of the things Coach Kahari Hicks was talking about the complete vapidness of music nowadays, and in particular how hip hop has become hijacked and forced into a type of degeneracy.
Right.
That wasn't necessarily originally part of it.
It wasn't. And let me just, be honest. Some of that was there, but at that time when we were young guys, 19, 20, 21, 22, you did have a socially conscious element there. I mean, you didn't have to look far to find it.
Right.
And so I really rejected a lot of the West Coast rappers and the East Coast rappers who were basically talking about, glamorizing materialism. It was all about intelligence for me. And so that was one of the things that really sparked the desire to, become Muslim. And also everyone else was doing that. Bookstores were very prevalent then, especially bookstores that dealt a lot with Afrocentrism. That was the big buzzword amongst the African Americans in New York, Jersey, Philadelphia, and even here in Cleveland. And so I was introduced to a host of scholars I had never heard of before. In fact, before my Shahada, I knew who Malcolm X was, but that was it. I had no other knowledge of him other than the fact, as most of us were told, he was an angry man. He was violent, right? When I read the autobiography and watched the documentary By Any Means Necessary, brought me to tears. And I couldn't believe that my family never talked to me about that. And so it was crystal clear at that point that this deen was it.
And that was before you were Muslim when you seen that documentary?
No, it was after I became Muslim, right. And so my early journey to Islam was just filled with a lot of learning. I befriended a group of immigrants who were Turkish. And from the outset with these guys, it was strictly about deen and knowledge. And that's what I really appreciated about them. That was the first group. The second group of guys that I was hanging with, which were my uncles, I guess we could call them, they were strictly leftist political activists who were professors, who taught in Ghana, who actually taught in other parts of West Africa, mainly Ghana, I think under Kwame Nkrumah, right, where they had many African Americans who were going there as teachers. And a brother who is now retired, Maxwell Stanford, I'll mention his name, an erudite who I have immense gratitude towards because he taught me a lot about understanding the world intellectually, politically. And the Turks who kept me my foundation in practicing Islam was a beautiful marriage.
Mashallah.
And so, mashallah, I'll never forget those guys, but it was a good journey, and so from there, I continued to practice and learn and met many brothers. Met this brother in '94 and a host of other brothers.
With the Turks.
With the Turks, yes, the Turks,
Inshallah,
right?
yeah.
Masjid Uqba, which was my home. It's where I cut my teeth. The old Uqba, which was a house at that time. And many, many, many beautiful brothers came through there. I remember when Ramis had hair, if he sees this, he was very active. And Brother Isam, who was a medical technician back then, he may be at ICC, but he works with CARE now. Right, many good people, man. And so I cut my teeth there and met so many people there. I got married at Uqba, my wife and I, and we have 2 beautiful kids.
MashaAllah. How long you been married?
23 years, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I guess this is a good segue into, which is that Brother Yayha, you also are married, right?
That's correct.
And you're. Do you mind telling if we ask what is the cultural background of your missus?
That's fine. Yes, she's Senegalese.
Okay.
Senegalese.
So that's
actually her mother's side are Mauritanian, actually.
There you go, mashallah.
Yeah.
And it's Mauritania, Senegal, all of these lines were drawn by some people.
Absolutely.
We'll
be nice.
Smoking a cigarette in Paris, right?
Right.
So
basically.
But it's
Other people who were like the ones that were chasing you before you were Muslim.
Right.
yeah, subhanallah.
Same.
So
different time.
Different time frame.
Yeah.
Different
So-
time frame.
particularly what I was interested in asking and like what I was interested in having a platform to jump off with our conversation and see where it goes is knowing from you what it's like being an African American in this country, being somebody that all you know about your background is servitude and bondage. All you know about your background is oppression. Even to the point where the oppressor took your names and the names of your people away from you.
That's right.
And having a nebulous idea that somehow we're from Africa.
That's right.
And what are the statistics of how many of the slaves were from West Africa, from the Muslim parts?
40%, 30.
Yeah.
Let's say
Give or
between
take.
20 and 30%.
And-
Some
and-
scholars may differ on that.
Yeah,
Right.
and so like
It's-
my understanding
It's a
is
good
the reason
percentage.
it's not more than that
Right.
is because those darn Muslims, when they would bring them over here, they were smarter. Some of them were
Yes.
smarter than the slave master.
Yep.
So they were more sophisticated than the slave master. They knew where they're coming from, where
Right.
they're going. Not
That's
like
right.
Africa and America, but
Right.
like from the dunya to the akhirah.
Right.
And they kept organizing slave revolts,
Absolutely.
Yes.
and you couldn't keep them down.
Yes.
And so afterward, apparently, like there was actually laws passed in most of the colonies in the Western Hemisphere that you can't bring these people anymore.
Right.
And to add to that, there's a sister, and I mentioned this before in a talk over at ICC. It's a sister I met years ago. She was like my grandmother, my Muslim grandmother.
Yeah.
Like she loved me to death. She's the only like sister that would like literally grab me after Juma and kiss me like this.
MashaAllah.
Beautiful woman. And she passed on, but
Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allah have
she
mercy
once
on her.
told me, she said, "Brother Yahya," I said, "Naam." And she said, my family's always been Muslim. I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, my family's always been Muslim." She says, "One of my great-great-grandfathers, he was purchased because he knew so many languages, and he was purchased to teach the slave master's children."
Allahu Akbar.
She said, one day that he was actually he was caught teaching his own kids the Quran with the stick in the sand on the ground, the abajada of the system. She said, so of course the first time he punished him and kind of let him go, but still punished. Of course he kept doing it because he knew the importance of education for the family. He actually chopped off his right hand. It didn't stop him. It didn't stop him. The sister told me he actually taught with his left hand with the stick, and they eventually chopped his left hand off. Sister Satara, I'll never forget her. Wallahi, I'll never forget her. She told me that he was teaching the Quran with a twig within a stick with his toes to his children in this country. This is our history. And this is right here in the city, Cleveland. And a lot of people don't know it. I'll never forget that woman's name. Allah Azim.
SubhanAllah.
So now I guess hopefully you're understanding what I meant by who our forefathers are in Iman in this place.
No.
And so, and those are stories that need to be told.
Right.
And so I wanted to know from you personally, for a number of reasons, what was it like? What was your journey like? Reconnecting with the Islam of not just of our ancestors,
Right.
but particularly those people who are your blood relatives.
Right.
You know, like mashallah, you
Right.
rolled in here. You put your hat on. I know it's hot outside right now. We're all sweating. You put your hat on right now. This brother, if I saw him in Cote d'Ivoire, I would not know that he from Cleveland.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And like so, like they're relatives, they're blood relatives, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, you know, جعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. One of the tafsirat of that is that we made you into tribes and nations so you can know each other. So that you can know who your relatives are, so you can honor them, because honoring your kinship bonds is part of Deen.
Absolutely.
And so, what is it like being taken from not being told these stories?
Right.
Not about your Islam, not about the devotion to learning and the devotion to that which was sacred from your forefathers.
Right.
Rather, all you know is that, like, you know, someone used to call them a particular bad word,
Yeah, of course.
and we don't use that word no more.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
and from that to like seeing this nobility,
Right.
and now connecting back with it, connecting back with those mashayikh,
Right.
connecting back with those people, with
Right.
those customs.
Right.
What were those things that you, when you travel back and forth to West
Absolutely.
Africa, how many times?
Absolutely. About 4 times now. Yeah.
About 4 times. The most recent
Right.
was when?
2017.
Yeah, it was relatively recently with the
Right.
whole family, you know.
Exactly.
And these are not like short visits.
No,
These
no,
are
no,
like
no.
very
From
culturally
mountain.
immersed visits,
Exactly.
right?
Absolutely.
And your children
100%.
are also
Absolutely. Yeah, we mix.
You know,
Some
alhamdulillah,
Middle East,
mashallah.
they go by themselves sometimes, even without me.
right.
Yeah.
And so your kids are African American, but they're also
Right.
African to their
exactly.
mother's side.
Real African American.
Yeah. So, what are those things that when you went to West Africa, you
Right.
felt like this is familiar, like this is who we were from before?
you know
what
it.
are those things that you didn't know, but you were like, this is what I needed?
Right.
And what are some of those things even like that
Right.
that you're like, yo, this is different. I don't know what I feel about this. You know?
No, you notice you
Like that.
it's nothing that you can understand rationally. Your soul knows this is home.
Allah.
Nobody can tell you this is home. Your soul will know that you're home. The smell, the sights you hear, the music in the background, or the Quran everywhere. You've been to some places where all night, all day, that's all you're hearing is Al Quran, or some qasaid or some nasheed playing in the background everywhere you go. You know, even like in the city, not just in the Muslim towns, quote unquote, the Muslim towns, right? But it's something that is personally feel that it completed me as a Muslim, knowing who I am, knowing who I come from, knowing that, you know, this man who could be a sheikh looks like my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And just having that familiarity, just with that alone is enough to be like, whoa, I need to be on this right here and do what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
You know, and it doesn't have to be this physical, but that spiritual connection is there. And it's something that's it's incomprehensible to the intellect, but your soul knows. Like one, and we discussed this earlier. One sheikh, his name was Bajop. We call him Bajop, and Bajop was a very spiritual deep guy. We spend the night talking about Islam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was one of those people that had like that dhok, that tasting. So if you mention Rasulullah's name sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I mean he's like shaking. That's the kind of people, you know, that you spend time with and been around, and that you can't not be but affected by being around people like that. Even if it's a short time, if it's 10 minutes, it's going to be like a month. Wallahi Azim. But that's the impression that it had for me. But not only that, of course, getting married, having my children from there, and they've, alhamdulillah, accepted me wholeheartedly as part of their family. They welcome me. They love me even. My wife gets mad because if we have an issue, she can't go to them because they always tell her to be quiet, listen to that man right there. Yeah, and it's a
Man,
deep
I should have
connection.
got married in Senegal.
How did you get exposed? Because you guys are both born and raised in Cleveland.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
How did you get exposed to the Senegalese community?
Well, it's a couple of different paths. The one brother here in Cleveland, his name was Omar Juf. Another brother named Mohammed Murtada Ka. They came from New York City, and they was part of the first Senegalese community that established a community there for the Sufi group, the Murids who follow Shana Bamba. They established that group there in Brooklyn, New York, back in the mid to early 80s.
And the Sheikh Ahmed
Yeah.
Bamba, by the way, inshallah, I want to, inshallah, as we go on, I want to ask you more about him. But I'll tell you, for me, the first exposure I had was that that there's a picture of him, and in the tradition of the Mashayikh of the Maghrib, he's mulatham. His face is covered. His face is covered always, you know?
Always.
And I just would ask, I said, who's this sheikh? I see his picture everywhere, you know? And they're like, that's Sheikh Ahmed Bamba. Who is he? He was a great wali of Allah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a deep story. I mean, I can go with that, or are you going to go with the?
Let's go with everything.
Everything.
Just go with the flow. Inshallah, brother Dawud, you jump in when you need to.
Alhamdulillah, absolutely.
I
please.
just want to say, picking up along the lines of what Sidi Yahya was talking about in his journey, I think it's important for us to understand. And for me, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz has a lot of weight. Because I come in, like I said earlier, both, you know, with the Turks, but also heavy political science was my journey in. And so studying Malcolm X's life, we see what Haji Malik was doing post-nation, which is really the sophisticated Malcolm, in my opinion. When he went over to Africa the year before he was murdered, this is exactly what he was trying to do. Right? With the organization of Afro-American unity, and tying it to that tradition in West Africa.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what he was trying to do.
Building bridges.
So you guys, what you're doing was what he was hoping for. You know, and this is important for us, I think, because this is part of what he was trying to get the African Americans to do, to realize you have dignity. Right? I think in this whole space that we're dealing with now, with this situation in the light of George Floyd, is I'm a little disturbed that we're treating the black community as some little, you know, stepchild over here in the corner that needs to be patted and groomed. It's okay by everyone, by the entire community of the Ummah. And I like for people to know, we all got skin in this game. We were talking about this earlier, okay? Because I remember before all of this, September 11th, I would say from 2001 probably to 2008 or 9, we were in an apologetic state. Every lecture on C-SPAN, talks given at the Masajid, was about how do we protect the immigrant community. We're all not jihadists, right? So the African American brothers, we came to that rescue, right? A lot of us were with CARE, you know, and other organizations trying to help to make sure that the immigrants were protected, that there was dignity there, that they wouldn't be harmed. So, you know, African Americans are not like everybody's poor. Just want to make sure we know that. A lot of us are professionals. Sidi Yahya and myself both, and lots of other people that I could name a host of. A lot of us live in nice neighborhoods. And to be honest, prior to 1965, and really after that, the African American community was well-known presence Islamically in the United States. So the issue of dignity here is important, I think. I just want to make sure we put that out there.
Absolutely.
And also the fact that what Sidi Yahya did was in the spirit of one of our great leaders, El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz.
And you know, like to maybe try to tie in threads together, right? He was assassinated, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he's our shaheed as Muslims in America.
Right.
You know, he's the flag of shahada in this country, mashallah. And that opposition was facilitated by people who didn't like to hear what he had to say.
Absolutely.
Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, he for him life was easy, right? Nobody gave him any trouble, right? In teaching the deen.
In the same vein, you know, speaking truth.
Was it who was it? Who was it who gave him a hard time?
The French.
Was it the same people or was it different people?
Same people. It's the same social structures.
Tubabo, right?
Right, the Tubabo. Absolutely. Well, same social structure.
Yeah.
Literally taken from his family.
Yep.
Like, a lot of people got killed as a result of that. Some of the other unfortunate chiefs were jealous of the community too, burned their houses, refused to, had embargo, so to speak. And eventually, long story short, he's exiled to Gabon for 7 years. In the
Gabon,
midst,
people who are not
Right.
people who are not geographically apt.
Right.
You might be like, oh look,
Okay.
it's just
Right.
it's Africa, right? How far is Gabon?
So
from...
he's dropped in the middle of a jungle in Gabon,
Yeah.
like with nothing, just nothing. Just he had his pen, they gave him a little stipend, right? They gave him a little stipend. He's a prisoner, and paper, and this is how he survived. Literally, thousands of line of qasides, 7.5 tons worth of writings and manuscripts in the Arabic language that he brought back with him for that journey, just from their first trip. They say, 7
You mentioned that
camels.
mashallah, but
Uh-huh.
Yayha brought me these 2 books
Uh-huh.
of the Sheikh as a gift. This is one of the qasaid. It's all in nazm. It's all in meter.
Uh-huh.
It's not
That's
easy to
right.
write,
No.
and it's beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna have
So,
to read from that a little bit before the podcast is over.
Absolutely.
Inshallah.
Absolutely.
Inshallah. So this was part of the tradition, that he brought back. But socially, he's bringing people together. Socially, he's trying to create balance where there was a vacuum created by those French colonial powers who were fighting to destroy the African community, the Senegalese community at that time. So this was a way to, again, give them a sense of pride of who they were as black people. And in one of his books, that famous book that Damascus named after, Masalik al-Janan, he says, don't think you can't benefit from my writings because I'm a black man. It's an introduction to Muqaddimah.
Wow.
And he says, black skin doesn't cause idiocy.
Wow.
It's stupidity. He says that. And he says, after that, the greatest person inside of Allah is those who has the best character, right? In the verse. So, and again, we can just be all day just on that topic, on that sheikh. In that story, but to tie it together with myself and my family, alhamdulillah, it's been a blessing to be connected with that community and not forgetting where I come from as far as my people here, and just tying it all together, and it felt like alhamdulillah completed me as a human being.
Mona Musa, you were saying something about before when we were just having coffee before the talk, about the extremes culturally amongst the Muslim community in America, about how there was a particular sensibility and then there's another sensibility that backlashed against it, and would you like to elaborate on that?
Specifically about
how there was a time in America where everything Western in certain masajids and communities was just
right. So, yeah, what I was referring to, and I've mentioned this before, and this is something kind of pretty well known, is that extremes breed extremes. So movements can be reactionary, and then there can be certain ways that we feel where we may have been mistreated or a certain aspect may have been misrepresented, and in order to balance that, we go to the other extreme, right? And I think that's to some degree what happened with a lot of us Muslims, especially who became Muslim in the 90s.
Right.
So you became Muslim in 89, 90,
right.
even
That's
94.
Right, that's right.
Yep.
And myself in 98. And Islam at that time was very anti-Western.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And everything
That's right.
about being
Right.
Western was considered to be un-Islamic.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true.
And that's where I think a lot
That's
of
true.
our struggle comes,
It did.
That's
right?
true.
Because now we're trying to kind of reconcile between our Western identity,
Yes.
being born and raised here,
Yep.
while trying to adopt something which is very, I don't want to say un-American, but was made to seem un-American.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So,
right.
you know, at some point, and this was all pre 9/11, and then after 9/11, you did fine, right? Because in the 90s, again, it was really hardcore Islam.
That's right.
You know, we were Muslim, and we don't follow the kuffar, and all this stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, after 9/11, everyone's like, you know, we're Muslim. We love you.
Right.
We're all together. We're good. You know, we're about being together. So the narrative changed.
Of course.
So it went on the other end of the pendulum.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you guys got to experience both ends of that.
That's right.
And this maybe could transition into something I want to ask you both about.
Yes.
Because specifically with African Americans, you have the, you know, your identities of African Americans being taken, and your names being changed. You changed your name.
Right.
Oh yeah, I did.
A lot of brothers don't change their name legally.
Right.
They'll adopt a Muslim name, but they won't necessarily change their name.
Right. That's right.
You kept your name.
I kept my name. That's true.
Right. And these are things that maybe someone who's born and raised Muslim never has to think about.
Right.
That's
right. I had to think about that as a convert. Do I want to keep my name?
Absolutely.
Do I want to change my name?
Right.
And do I want to take a name? Do I want to, you know, but not change it legally?
Right.
Exactly.
That's right.
So maybe provide some insight into that whole decision process.
I'll go. Just for me, it was a struggle too.
Okay.
Because of course, being around this brother here and other brothers, I like Dawud did it. Like Yayha was going on, right? So, what kind of gave me solace was again that trip, the Senegal, and speaking with my future father-in-law at the time, and I was telling him I'm thinking about, you know, doing this name change because at that time I was already Muslim for maybe 6-7 years. And I said maybe I should change it, you know, officially. He said, you know, you are who you are. You know, Iman is here. You know, and as long as you know who you are,
and this was your father-in-law.
Yes.
SubhanAllah.
Yes. Born, you know, Islam for centuries and centuries and centuries. You know, so and he told me this. So and that kind of alhamdulillah, just be you, but stick to what you're supposed to do Islamically.
See, that's where I'll pass it to you in a moment. But this is where that balance eventually, you know, things will level out. Right. There's a lot of instability. But as long as you're steadfast, eventually it'll balance out. It'll level out.
Absolutely.
Right. So there was that maybe some hardcore, you go neck deep.
Right.
But then, you know, does that mean you're gonna also change your name totally?
Right.
But you also have to remember that you can't hate yourself either.
Right. No, you can't.
Right.
Well, for me, again, the arguments coming out of Malcolm X's position, and I keep mentioning him, although I know those who are hardcore Nation of Islam, even if some NOI guys are looking at this, I'm sorry. Personally, for me personally, that's the greatest man that ever came out of that organization. Alhamdulillah. The way he articulated the argument was crystal clear. You know, our forefathers had their names taken from them. And when you read that and you reflect on it, right, who we were in Africa being completely stripped from that.
That's right.
Mashallah, you going back and connecting with that was beautiful. I mean, we know Alex Haley didn't change his name either when he went back and saw his family. He didn't become Muslim, right? But it was a journey he took.
Exactly.
By the way, one of my friends I studied with in Mauritania, Mandinka brother by the name of Kimo. Maybe I mentioned this last time. He was actually from Kunta Kinte's village.
Mashallah.
I thought I just mentioned that.
As Haley was. So for me, it was a little different. I mean, I was reading stuff that was historically charged, and it stirred something in me, right? At that time, and I said, this is true. I mean, my family didn't even know who they were, of course. Now we got DNA tests and all that.
Right.
Doesn't cost much to do it. Right. But I mean, then the argument was clear. I don't want to wear that name, you know. And I know that may mean some things for my family, but we already had people in my family who had done it. So I did have some great uncles that were Muslims. Of which, you know, my grandfathers, they're going, we're talking about 30s, 40s. Right. So these are my grandfathers.
That was going to be my follow-up, is how your family reacted to
it. They already knew about Islam. So they, he's doing his thing. Right. We know about the other guys that were in it. You know, family stories and all that.
Of course.
So for me, when I changed my name, I just want to make sure this was clear. My entire life got better. Wallahi. When I became Dawud Muhammad, everything got better for me, intellectually, spiritually, and financially. It was a beautiful thing. I was reflecting on this, talking to my wife about this many times, because at one point I was thinking to myself, and this was right around post September 11th, right? I was like, man, what does this mean? I'm still holding this name, you know. And so it was something that, you know, I wrestled with, but at the end of the day, I don't regret it, you know, and it was a good thing for me and for my family. But I do understand the arguments. We went through some of those. I mean, some brothers were reading Bilal Phillips back in the day, and there were positions where, you know, we shouldn't change our name or the last name. Some people changed the first name, but they didn't change the last name. And the last name was really, if you want to be technical, where that history of slavery came from, right? You were the property of whoever, you know, Coates, Johnson, right? Williams, or whomever. And so, for me, the whole name should go. Now, there's differences of opinion, but mashallah, there are many brothers like Dr. Sherman Jackson. I think he keeps his legal name, right? And many other people that do. So alhamdulillah, the more important things, we're all Muslim. Right. You know, mashallah.
But, so, I apologize.
No, but yeah.
So, you know, I guess what I wanted to frame was that, like Sheikh Musa was saying, two extremes, the pendulum swings hard one way or the other. To transcend the chaos, right? We all know a reasonable person, I don't know if anyone would want to disagree with me on this, a reasonable person would say, look, you have certain things you pick up from your upbringing in this country and its culture, the knowledge and all the things that come with it. And there are certain benefits in the kind of the culture, history, learning, modes of thinking and being from the Muslim world. And al-hikmatu dalatul mu'min, the wisdom is a lost property of the believer. Wherever he finds it, it's his own property. He has a right to claim it. So we now have a chance to transcend that old false dichotomy and that old, like, you know, just two extremisms by taking the best of both sides. So coming back to both of your experiences in going in Africa, you know, some of the things we asked about before, I'd like for you to elaborate further. Maybe even the idea of, like, if you met someone who was like an African American, grew up, born, raised here, has some consciousness about you know, his history or her history, and you know, where they're at in society, and you were to describe to them how going to Africa and connecting to Africa changed you.
Absolutely.
You know, like, what would you say?
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit just to the name thing, just to piggyback off of that. The other point I wanted to make was that even though I knew that I wouldn't do the legal change, I knew all my children would have the names of the prophetic household.
Mashallah, alhamdulillah.
I have a Khadija, I have a Kulthum, and a Fatima.
Alhamdulillah.
And that was good for me.
You know,
I mean, yeah, but it's something that even Dr. Omar, he met me, alhamdulillah, he said the same thing. You know, I can't believe you're American. Dr. Omar Abdullah Farouk, when he came here that last visit. And he couldn't believe we were almost arguing with me, right? And so he says, you know, Yayha, he said, do me a favor. I said, Naam. He says, make sure you tell your people where they come from. And make sure they tell them to go, to see where they come from. You know, I'll never forget that. So it's something for me, and I think is extremely, extremely important for any Muslim, especially African American Muslim, to make that journey once in their life.
Or even, at least non-Muslims, huh?
Not anybody. But because you see, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I mean, I've met, you know, I want to be politically correct here, like the white people, right? Who go there and change their names, Mustafa, Saliu, and they're not even Muslim, right? But they go and they live there, walk around and go into the shops and speaking Wolof better than the local people, because they get the true Wolof from the countryside.
Wolof is the language of the main tribe of Senegal, right?
Well, most Wolof, Wolof is one of the language. Wolof, you got Serer, you got Tukulur language. The Pul is a language they speak, Mandinke. So it's a Malaja, like Jola. You know, Sose, there's a lot of different languages just in that Senegalese region. The majority of the people speak, of course, Wolof and then French. The Wolof's kind of the liquid breaker between all of them. But, you know, depending upon where you live, you know, you're going to speak the language of your tribe. But everybody, again, knows the Wolof, understands it, even if it's not properly spoken. They, of course, now with everything else, they mix it with French, English, everything else, you know. It's extremely, 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 I can't stress it enough, to go to the masjid See, and I remember last time I was reflecting, I made a post on Facebook.
Like, dude, tell me specifics.
Yeah.
You know, because everyone's gonna be like, okay, yeah, Africa's good.
Yeah.
Check. Like, what
No,
is
this
it?
is this I'm getting into.
Yeah.
One of the major crimes for me is like just not knowing who you are and where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
You go to any inner city here in Cleveland, unfortunately, your head's on the swivel, right? Good or bad, right or wrong, it is what it is. But you're in the middle of the kind of not so nice near or poor neighborhood, I would say, like in the middle of Dakar at night, and everybody's black. But little kids, 12 years old, are taking you by the hand, running to the masjid to pray.
Allahu
Like you don't have to tell them it's time to make salat. They're taking you and making salat, doing everything and coming back.
Alhamdulillah.
I remember, never forget my little, at the time she was little, she's a grown woman now with kids. My sister-in-law, Aminata, literally teaching me how to make wudu.
Allahu Akbar.
And she's 12, she's in the water, and then it's like, you know, you have the traditional Maliki way, you put the little water, you preserving the water, so that's in the back of your mind now. So that's something that even my daughter now to this day, little trickle of water, making the wudu, she's in the sink and teaching me how to do it at 12.
That's the sunnah. That's
You know,
sunnah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
mashallah.
So I mean, that's those experiences, spending the time. I mean, again, it's so many specific details I can go into because
Go into them.
the
It's a podcast, brother.
it's-
We don't have no like 30-second time limit here.
so I'll give you another example. I met a sheikh, that one sheikh, Sheikh Bajo, rahimahullah, he passed
Ameen.
away. I was on a Jummah, and I spent the night at his house. One night we were discussing again the history of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the history of Shalnabamba, and he says, you know, and we're going over some asra, not I won't say asra, some of the names Asma'ullahi, right, and they're breaking down some of their values, right, and he says, you know, when he tells me this is it's in 2000. That was my first trip. He says, Yayha, you know, there's going to be another financial crash that's going to happen in America. This man's never been to the United States, barely speaks English. He said there'll be another financial crash in America. He says, at that time, and I think I told you this, there'll be a black president.
Ajib.
Wallahi. People that know me will testify to that and to that man, because I heard about him before I met him, but I never knew that I would meet him. It just kind of was by Allah that I met him. He said, not only that, he said that man will have a Muslim name. In the back of my mind, I'm like, come on now, you kind of got too far at that time. Right. At that time. And of course, you know, years later, as we've seen the signs of this young Barack Hussein Obama is coming, you know, considering going to office. I'm like, no, you got to be kidding me.
It was just a perfect alignment.
Right, man. And he told me that, you know, years later, and to the point where when I went back on my second visit in 2010, 2011, and he said, I told you.
Yeah.
Like, I told you.
You see that
Yeah.
Democratic convention.
Right.
Call up your financial manager, sell everything.
I'm not making that up, and that's something, wallahi, I have no reason to make that up, because I couldn't tell that story without even shaking.
Yeah, mashallah.
You know, so, but just meeting like these people that like just with the deen, it's time to pray. It's everywhere. The adhan is everywhere. You know, the time to pray Fajr. There's no excuse not to pray Fajr on time in a masjid, and you get to choose between which masjid you want. I want to go to this masjid today, this one over here, because it's within walking distance. It's an incredible experience.
I have a question for you, though, because I thought about this. Why do you think, because we know along the western coast of Africa, there's several Muslim societies,
Right.
but everybody always focuses on synagogues. All the time. We know we've got
Right.
Ghana,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
which is a pretty big Muslim community
Absolutely.
there too, right?
Absolutely.
No one ever talks about
That's true.
Ghana though.
That's true.
Seriously, synagogue all
That's
the time.
true.
Is it, you
That's
think
true.
it's because of roots or Alex Haley?
Well, I don't know. I think it's more, Senegal is like the hub of West Africa. It's
Yeah.
right there in the coastal area.
Yeah.
It's like a meeting place for all those countries.
Right.
Even before they come here, they
Right.
have to make a stop to Senegal
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
I think that's it. You know, I can't say Allahu Alam. You know, it
Yeah,
depends on
yeah.
your circle.
I don't know, I mean,
There
that's
were
what-
brothers here. I know that, you know, big brothers here that were from Ghana, and you know, Sheikh Masood and
Right,
so
right,
forth and
right.
so on.
In
Another brother
Nigeria
named
too, we got
Sheikh
plenty of
Musa.
brothers in Nigeria.
And Nigeria is
Yeah.
the biggest community here in Cleveland.
Right.
You know, but Senegalese is just, again, who I've drawn affinity to. They accepted me as a brother.
Well, I think one difference also is that like Senegal and Gambia are are pretty predominantly Muslim societies.
They are.
Whereas
95%.
Ghana,
Yeah.
Nigeria, I mean,
Right.
Nigeria culturally has a very rich
Right.
cultural
It
history
does,
with
yeah.
Islam. But the
Yeah.
issue with Nigeria and with Ghana,
Yes.
with both of them, is the dynamic is that, and those are strange, I think, historically, in the sense that
Yes.
Islam actually reached those people before Christianity
Yes.
did.
Yep.
And so what happens is
Right.
that the coastal regions in
Right.
those two countries,
Right.
like the animist population,
Yes.
will
Yes.
accept Christianity. One can hope that it was out of
Right.
some sort of sincerity for the gospel of Jesus Christ, but it's quite possible that it was in order to be politically
Absolutely.
expedient and
Yes.
make it with
Yeah.
the colonizer.
Right.
Right.
And so those people get, like, I've heard this from a lot of people, Nigerians in particular,
Right.
where like they won't let you into school until you convert to Christianity.
Mm.
They won't give you a job until you convert to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is you have a culture and civilization that's
Right.
ancient and an identity that is
Right.
very deep in the
Right.
north.
Right.
Right. Right.
In the south, you may not have that as much, but you have
Right.
the money, the wealth, the power.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that tension is there, and
Right.
our brothers and sisters in both
Right.
societies,
Right.
I think,
Right.
are in somewhat of a precarious situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas
Right.
in Senegal, Gambia,
Right.
there that danger or
That's
that
true.
tension is not really there.
Right.
It's
and,
not.
and it's a culture of resistance too, because they fought the French historically, and it was something that they always had to contend with, and they knew that the French concept was to control the mind, not just even the things. They wanted your mind. They wanted you to have French culture, and they were strictly the old ulama. You couldn't even go to certain sessions with non-Islamic clothes. It's impossible.
You're talking about in Senegal.
In Senegal,
Yeah.
correct. So this is where that's in like in the 70s, So
Right. But I think
Yeah.
probably it may be worth emphasizing
No.
too with that, because
right.
when you talk about fighting, you're talking about not qital.
I say
per se.
resistance.
Yeah, resistance. Oh, yeah, resistance. Yeah, yeah,
resistance.
yeah, yeah.
Resistance.
Right.
So, for example, I mean, and there's other shuyukh. You have to say, talk about Sheikh Omar Futi Utal, Malik Si, El Hajj Malik Si. You talk about Sheikh Ibrahim Nias, in conjunction with Isha Nabamba and his movement and his mission. So those ulama was, again, you go to by Nias, for example, big shuyukh, big huge community. I mean, Quran is like incredible, and it's like they didn't play with Al-Quran. It's like the kitab was everything for those people, and it makes an impression. If you're around them and that's all that you're seeing them do, I mean, how can that not affect you if you have someone with a good heart?
I've never seen a place,
Yeah.
to be honest with you,
Yeah.
where the Hifz culture is more entrenched than West Africa.
Right.
And I have a feeling this is the way it was in the
Right.
Ummah, in the entire Ummah at one
Right,
time.
I believe it.
But they preserved it when other people
Right.
let it go.
They have the Quran reciters, the ones that won the competition 2 or 3 years ago
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Senegal.
Yeah,
Particularly Mohammed, I want to say Mahmoud Toure
yeah.
was from Tuba, and then another sister, she won 4th place. He won 1st.
But even then,
and
those competitions
Right.
have a lot of like artistic element in
yes,
them.
that's cool, of course.
But if you want to
Yes,
have a person
that's
who
true.
will get up and recite from
Yep.
Al-Fatiha to Nas without
Yep.
making a mistake, without even flinching,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
that's the
That's
West
true.
Africans will do that
Absolutely.
because nobody else has the himmah to put in that much effort into the Book of Allah Ta'ala. And it's very
incredible.
interesting, like BBC and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
They hate on them for
Right,
this.
I
The
believe it.
Kutab, the
Yeah.
Quran schools.
Yeah.
And but I'm telling you, any
Yeah,
place where the
that's
maktab the
Yes.
maktab is good, the Islam is going to be good.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's a good
Right.
point. I mean, because I know we talk about Africa, and we were just talking about this
Of course.
earlier.
Yes.
To give Africa, particularly West Africa, its due in the broader scope of Islamic civilization,
Okay.
I think it's still missing.
Right.
Right.
That's true. That's
And
true.
I would really like to see at some point the academic societies start to really bring that more to the fore.
Well, to push back against that, having studied in madrasa, I can tell you in Pakistan, every person I told I studied in Mauritania, it was instant respect. In fact, the Madrasat Ibn Abbas, Dr. Amjad, who was an old school tablighi, he came and made tabligh in America. And it's really funny, actually. Bhai Khalid from Seattle, Khalid Saab, he was the Emir of tabligh in Seattle. Allah to have mercy on him. And he literally, the guy would like go on Jamaat in between chemotherapy.
Subhanallah.
And I thought he was joking at us, or like
Subhanallah.
delusional at first.
Right,
He's
right.
like, he'd come back from Jamaat. I'd be, I didn't see you for a while, Khalid Saab. Where he's, I was on Jamaat. Make dua. The cancer hurts a little bit, but make
Subhanallah.
dua. We can still go out in the path of Allah. So he told me this. He said that Dr. Amjad, who was the son of the first president of Pakistan,
Okay.
his father Chaudhry Muhammad Ali,
Uh-huh.
and he kind of like left the whole pro-British side and took up Deen.
Yes.
He said that when he came on Jamaat to America, he was saying like, build your masjid. You know, they said, oh, here, we bought this property. We want to build a masjid here one day. He said, okay, do this, do that. You have to have a place. Tell me, where's the students going to live? Where are the ulama going to live? Where's the madrasa going to be? Where is this? And they're like, are you joking? We don't even have 5 daily prayers. What are you talking about? Madaris and things like that. You know?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you have to do all of that if you guys want your Islam to survive. And now, mashallah, we have Darul Qasim, we have Darul Salam, we have the Darul Uloom in New York, we have Qalam, and we have all these different institutions that are doing this work, right?
Yeah.
Mashallah. So he actually, his madrasa that he oversees, Allah Ta'ala keep him in good health and give him long life. He, mashallah, even though they're from the same caste as us, they're not only Punjabis but from the same caste. He refuses to speak to me. Once he knows you know Arabic, he will refuse to speak to you in any other language, right? So he actually in his madrasa Ibn Abbas and madrasa Aisha that my wife graduated from, they actually brought Mauritanians over in order to do what?
Wow.
In order to implement their Hifz methodology. Even though Pakistan is a markaz, a hub in the world for the Hifz of Quran, most of the teachers in America or in the Haramain Sharifain and a lot of places in the world, they actually are from the Indian subcontinent, right? But even him, he was like, so to push back, they get props. Not that people don't know or don't recognize. Maybe the public they don't.
Right.
But like the ulama know what's up.
People who know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People who know.
I guess I'm talking about more mainstream, because the broader audience who typically sees Islam, in its glorious past, typically is going to associate it with the Arabian world, Persia,
of course,
and then of course North Africa and Europe. But very rarely do we hear about that. I think on the ground you're right, amongst the real intelligentsia of the Muslim, community and the scholars. But more, inshallah, we'll see in another decade or so. A lot of the traditions are wrestling with things in general.
So I have a question actually for both of you, because you've also been to the West African nations.
I haven't been there.
Oh, you haven't?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe you could help me with this, because I think this topic comes up with a lot of African Americans, and some people have an interest, some people don't. But for those who do have an interest, how difficult is it to go and visit and to kind of get connected and to kind of like learn a little bit? Because I think most people that are not very privy to international travel, they hear that and they're immediately like, oh, it costs way too much.
And I want to know about this too. And I know we're gonna have some people who are listening like, I don't need no foreign Islam. I'm from Cleveland.
Of course.
You know what? You enjoy yourself.
Right.
Okay, I'm going. I'm going.
Yeah. But there could be black folks who watch that aren't Muslim that are still interested in this. And just in general, I think there are going to be some people who are interested. I know I am.
Right.
I'll just outright say it. I'm very interested in everything that you've been talking about. I've been listening to, because I think about a lot of these things too. But like
it's best to if you are connected or can get affiliated with a community here somewhere in the States, because you don't want to go just like anywhere else. You don't want to be a total stranger. You want to have a connection, that someone you trust, and that has family back home or is willing to travel with you and take you to kind of see the real on the ground, and not just the touristic type spots. I mean, of course, we all want to go to Gorée. You want to see at least in Senegal, they have the Renaissance Monument. I mean, okay, but you want to see how the people live and be with the people.
Gorée Island is the island where...
That's the last of one of the slave houses. It's basically a house. White people actually lived up top. The slaves were kept in the bottom. I did the whole tour a couple of times, but a place where they kept the women, a place where they kept the virgin girls, a place where they kept the children, a place where they punished the slaves. You can't even stand up. It's like about this tall. You have to sit and bend like this. And the rooms where they kept all the men. And it's like you have I don't know how many hundreds of men cramped into one room. It's so tight you can't even sit down, right? And then, of course, in between all that's the door of no return. They call it the door of no return, right? So you go to that door, that's it, Kalash, you're gone. Even, they said the sharks used to be circling around the area. It was heavily populated with sharks at that time. And again, that was, subhanAllah. I mean, that's the history. But Gorée, but besides that, it's a beautiful, beautiful island. Very beautiful island. The masjid there on top of the ocean overlooking the Atlantic is something you have to witness and see.
Go back,
Yeah.
go back, inshallah. Go
Right.
go back, and then inshallah
That's
walk
right.
through the door with the idhn of the Prophet
I mean,
sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Instead of going as
That's
a
right.
slave, go
That's
as
right.
an opener of hearts,
I mean,
inshallah.
I mean,
You know, free
mean,
yourself of that. Free
I mean,
yourself of that blight. You know.
I mean,
And is it expensive for people who might be watching, and for myself?
No. Like anything else, you have to. It depends on the travel season. You know, certain seasons, the summertime is prices go up. And anything else, the fall, early winter, prices go down. Of course, around the quote unquote holidays, the prices go back up again. But I mean, it really depends on the airline, of course. If you can get a group ticket, it's even better. My first trip, I spent like $800, I think, but I could stay 30 days.
Mashallah.
But again, last year was almost 2,000.
And
right?
you can
So-
book your travels through YAA Travel Agency.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I need. That's what I need.
No,
That's what I'm looking
No,
for.
I know. Just let me know. Just let me know. I definitely got connections.
Oh,
but,
man.
I definitely got connections. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
So one of the things I want to see personally, I know Imam Dawud Walid, he had mentioned about a trip to Senegal, a trip to Gambia, a trip to different parts of West Africa.
Inshallah.
And when he had asked if I was interested, I said I'm interested, but I just want to buy a one-way ticket. Honest.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that really is
Okay.
like first on my to-do list,
Yes,
my
yes.
checklist,
Yes.
is that just like the companions radiallahu anhum, they started cities. The Prophet ﷺ, Medina, he was the one who inaugurated Medina.
Right.
You know, before that it was just scattered settlements.
Exactly.
He made it into a city.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and then afterward the companions they carried this tradition that they were the ones who made Basra. They're the ones who made Kufa.
Right.
Kufa then will evolve into Baghdad.
Right.
And then they made Fustat, which will evolve into the medieval city of Cairo. They made Qayrawan, which is the original metropolis of Tunisia, the modern nation state of Tunisia. And then afterward, like, Moulay Idris, the great grandson of Sayyidina Hassan, the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, he made Fas into a city, right? Yusuf bin Tashifin made Marrakesh into a city. It's such a Mubarak city, mashallah, for those who are looking for the barakah and for those looking for something else. But at any rate, but
You won't
it is,
comment on that,
if you're not completely blind, you cannot avoid the barakah. It's there,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The really beautiful thing about Senegal is Medina Baye, in the city of Touba.
Right. Mashallah.
The Mashaykh started these cities from nothing.
Absolutely.
And it's an entire city built from the ground
No,
up
That's right.
on La ilaha illallah and on Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the love of Allah and the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Dr. Omar, I heard him mention so many times the beauty of Touba, right? Who made Touba?
Right.
What is the story about it?
Right.
What will you find over there?
Right.
How does it compare to other cities in Africa? Tell me about Touba.
Touba is I mean, you don't want to kind of, people think you're kind of over-aggrandizing or what have you, but it's something.
Just say the haqq and don't worry about whether people
wallahi,
believe you or not.
You will not be disappointed. That's one of the first places you go and you feel like, okay, I can just go right now. If it's my time, if it's Allah's will, I'm happy with that. Yeah, that's how I feel. Being with the shuyukh, you feel the blessings of the du'as of those sheikhs. All day Quran, all day is the La ilaha illallah, the masjid, and of course every property pretty much has their own separate masjid with the shuyukh, but the grand masjid of Touba is something that's, you would think is straight out of ancient medieval times, or some great civilization 1,000 years ago. For example.
These types of joints, I think of them as like, how there's like a main campus, and
Right.
there's a branch campus. These are all like branch campuses
Right.
of Medina type places.
Exactly. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling you get. Because the sheikh, I mean, people literally, and even building that place, the sweat, the blood, the tears, everything it took to make that happen at that time. I mean, you can't imagine.
Who was the founder of Touba?
Sheikh Hamda Bamba.
Same
Sheikh
sheikh, right?
Bamba, same
And
sheikh.
did
Same
he
sheikh.
have like a king backed him, or
No king backed him.
was there a city there from before?
No city there before. It was
Did he
straight.
get some? Did
It was
Steve
straight-
Mnuchin sign the
straight
check for the
straight.
stimulus?
It was
small business.
jungle. I mean, it's incredible that place literally came from nothing.
And
Literally came from nothing.
What is it? Is it a dirty city? Is it? Tell me about
It's
it.
the biggest. It's the largest. Well, the second largest city in Senegal right now. You will go there, like literally, you can't walk on the premises of the masjid without shoes. You have to take your shoes off outside of the mosque. All marble. marbles everywhere. You know, so it could be 200 degrees. You know, your feet's nice and cool. It's incredible. The library, one of the founders of the library there, commanding just the books of the sheikh, his sons, his children. One of the grandsons of the Shalabamba, I was with them, Sheikh Abdul Baki. He told me, he said, our family tradition is to write tafsir. Right, that's the family tradition. Right, so you can see the different family members with diwans of qasaids, diwans or books of tafsir of Quran, or their own personal Qurans they wrote themselves. You know, and that's the tradition. They used to write Qurans and dedicate it for, well, of course, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they write Quran and dedicate it to their grandfather as hadiyah, as a gift. You know, which is incredible. You know,
because this is another thing that I guess we should remember. You know, while people are you know getting paid by executives that don't give a damn about African Americans to portray African American culture in this country as materialism and as degrading to women and as crime and drug use and all this other nonsense. You know, if you look at the true legacy of West Africa, it's like learning the best library. At some point in the history of Islam and the history of the world, the best libraries in the world, the most complete libraries in the world are where? Timbuktu. They're in places all through West Africa where kings used to compete with each other. You know, the royal princesses, you know, they weren't no, you know, they weren't no damaged goods, you know, materialistic, narcissistic, like taking selfies of themselves and flaunting them. No, what was their mahar they would ask for is like books.
That's it.
I need copies of this, I need copies of that, and it would be expensive. It would be just as much as Kim Kardashian spends on whatever the hell she spent money on, or you know, those who are like her or want to be like her.
Absolutely.
But it would be on what? It would be on tafsir, the Quran. It would be on.
He would send people, commission people to go travel to Egypt to get the, you know, different tafsirs and things like that. Send people to Lebanon, for example, to get books, and it's incredible. And people, of course, from those.
And you're talking about today. You're not talking about.
No.
Yeah,
absolutely. Today, well, and back then too.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big deal. It's all about, you know, knowledge, and learning and being close to Allah. And you would meet like kids going into spiritual retreat. You know, it's like it's something that's just beyond a comprehension. Like, you have to kind of see it to believe it.
And what are the marketplaces like?
Books and food. And books, it's incredible.
Is it dirty? Is it clean? Tell me
no,
about
it's clean. It's everything you need.
People try to be hustling you, ripping you off?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's against the law. You can't play music in that place. You can't even play music. You can't play music, and you have signs. You know, no music allowed. Yeah.
Imam Dawud, he actually told me about that. He said that if a person of value comes and visits, and they say that I like this place, literally the mashayikh will give them, like, you know, you know how like we have recruiters that will recruit people who know how to code or people who know how to play ball or anything. If you have ilm and you're serious, you want to move there, the mashayikh will actually give you an allotment of land. They say this is plot number whatever on the street. Go set yourself up right now. This is what we need. This is what we want.
Happens all the time.
No, I'm taking notes.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, taking notes.
Yeah, but the writing was something that at least it attracted me, because even with his style, he would take, for example, like an acrostic, a poem, and make it like an acrostic version of it. So he'll take like La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you can read it vertically down a page, and then rhyming all the letters and praising the Prophet, praising Allah, reciting the attributes of Allah in the qasida, in the writings, for example. And that's just the books on salawat. Like, for example, one of the books you got right here. This is
the Nur Darain.
Nur Daraini and Muqaddimat al-Kubra. Yeah, right. So that one is like it's a salawat using all the names of the prophets, right? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Starting with the Hamzah, and he'll go Hamzah.
Different Hamzah, but yeah.
and like literally listing all the names and doing salawats and praising the Prophet from every single name, over 700 names of the Prophet, for example. You know, so this is just one manuscript. So it's many writings and many things you can discover and find. The best thing is just to be connected and just go and see for yourself. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, I can talk to them blue in the face. People need to go and see these places.
Has there ever been anyone that's taken this shahada there?
Absolutely. A good friend of mine from Paris, his mom is Congolese, and his father was French. He told me he went and took a shahada there.
MashaAllah.
He actually got married.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So it can happen. Absolutely.
You know, what's really amazing too is that whole journey began with you hiding out
right
in the library.
Wallahi,
yes. Reading Haji Malik's.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Right.
See, like,
Yeah.
Right. Right. It's incredible.
Malcolm X, rahimahullah, and then that initiates just a whole different trajectory of your life.
Absolutely.
And it's a reminder of
Right.
how Allah is the one who guides. And
Wallahi Azim.
if Allah wants good for you, then no one can withhold that.
That's right.
During that time, to add to your point, during that time, someone asked me, he said, "Yeah, I see you reading a lot of books on Islam. What's that about? You want to be Muslim?" I was like, I don't know. I like Islam, but I can't even see myself as Muslim. And then a week later, I'm taking my shahada at Tayyar Masjid, you know. So
Let me ask you a
just,
question
no.
regarding that, because I never asked you this before.
Yes.
You hear a lot of people who take the shahada, like some of us converts.
Yes.
Some people will say they were just at a crossroads. They were not very happy as Christians. I know for me, I wasn't dissatisfied with being a Christian.
Right.
But there was something inside of me that didn't resist when Yusuf asked me to go to church with him, which was the mosque.
Right, absolutely.
In which I knew what he was doing.
Right.
There was something that didn't say, I don't know about that.
Right.
It was smooth, man.
Right.
Almost like
Right.
I didn't have a choice to resist.
Exactly.
Yet, I wasn't trying to push back.
Right.
So I'm saying, were you dissatisfied at all in Christianity?
I wanted something deeper.
Okay.
And I had something inwardly was telling me there's something deeper out here.
Right.
Where you go, unfortunately, to the church and you ask
Right.
questions. The Trinity, of course, they of course, as we know, they can't answer
Right.
those questions. They still, that's a issue they can't deal with.
But I mean, was it like,
But-
were you just like this Christianity is
No,
about-
I
Yes, I'm
was,
talking-
for me, I'll never forget, I read an article in one magazine. It was called Focus Magazine.
Yeah,
I think
Focus,
it's
yep.
an offshoot of like Ebony or something
Right.
like that. In that magazine, it had an article with Wesley Snipes.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, he made a comment. He says, he said, somebody asked you what's your religion. He says, I follow the religion of the prophets.
Right.
You know, I follow the religion that Isa alayhi salam, or Jesus practiced at this
Right.
time. I follow the religion of Musa alayhi salam, you know, for example. So that kind of triggered something. And I read, going back to the...
He wasn't
No,
saying Musa and Isa, was he?
No, he wasn't saying
Okay,
that. No,
okay,
no, it was
okay.
Jesus, Moses.
It was weird.
So,
It's-
yeah, but some people
yeah,
say he
was
became
and
Muslim.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
Some people say that. So reading that article and then, of course, going
If
back
not, and you're
years
listening
later.
to our podcast, what
Hey,
are you waiting for?
That's right. so years later, when reading, going back and revisiting the biography before I was Muslim, I made a connection when Hajj Malik said that comment at the Kaaba. So it's like, oh, this is what he's talking about, you know. So I just made a connection. I said, hey, let's do this.
And you know, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam mentions groups of people who they'll receive double the reward. And one of them is the person who followed one of the divinely revealed religions, Christianity, Judaism, etc. And then afterward accepts Islam with the intention of this is how I'm gonna up my Christianity, this is how I'm gonna up my Judaism, that this is the deen of Sayyidina Musa, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. That person will receive their reward then double because of their sincerity that they're doing it. Another thing, mashallah, you were talking about the panah, the refuge from being chased.
Yeah.
This is actually a tradition in Madaris in the East and in the West, even in Mauritania. That and it's something very reminiscent of the law of the Torah, which is that if a criminal flees and then seeks refuge in another place and takes up the path of righteousness, that you don't give them up to the authorities when they come looking for them. And for whatever strange reason, we have that tradition. Like in madrasa in Mauritania and in Pakistan, there'll be people you're like, interesting. This guy just doesn't strike me as the type of person who's like trying to learn fiqh. You know what I mean? And those cats will lay low, and they're annoying. They're really annoying to deal with. They don't pray right. They don't pay attention to class. They just, they're just irritating people. And like you see them, some of them will be lying low. And so, it's literally people have told me, by Hamzah, so and so, he killed a man in like Faisalabad, and he's just here, just to hide out. And that same person, what will happen one day? They'll sit, in the bayan of the mashayikh. And like the rock cracks and they will sob uncontrollably, and then you'll see they are the most annoying disciple of the sheikh, and they're the most goody two shoes, and if you say anything or out of line, they're gonna like be the one who's gonna like trying to be all holier than thou up on you and everything, because they when they fall hard, and like SubhanAllah, like that's one of the adhkar mashayikh taught us, La malja wa la manja min Allah illa ilayh, that there's no refuge and there's no safety from Allah except for in Him.
That's right.
So mashallah, you ran and Allah Ta'ala took you into His protection. Allah Ta'ala take all of us in like that.
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Allah Ameen. Alhamdulillah.
Wow.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Any other questions? You go.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Barakallahu feekum.
Ameen.
It's definitely a pleasure.
Ameen.
To always spend time with
Polite,
you brothers.
polite,
Absolutely.
polite.
Dawud,
Mhm.
myself, we haven't really had a chance
Right.
to sit
Just in
before.
passing at
Yeah,
least.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to sit with the
Yeah.
brothers.
Yeah.
Get a little
Absolutely.
more insight.
Right.
and,
Absolutely.
And
What
I
our
want to thank
experiences were.
Sheikh Musa too, because he took a lot of patience with me
um,
in our sarf and nahu class, especially with the sarf. I had nightmares going over those verb patterns, but alhamdulillah,
Surf's up, man.
yeah, right. We got some benefit right now, inshallah.
alhamdulillah.
I mean,
That's
inshallah.
what and the thing is, you took surf, so you know how hard it would have been to write something like this.
Right. Right.
Just to be able to write
Yeah,
one
appreciate
line
it.
like this, and
Yeah,
this is like a
appreciate
whole
it.
book, like how
Right.
hard it would have been,
Right. That's why I can appreciate it.
and
That's
to
why I
crank them
appreciate it.
out like,
Crank 'em out it's incredible. 7.5 tons of
most people
manuscripts.
that are Arabs,
Right. It's not possible.
no. You say Nahu and Sarf, man,
Uh-huh.
some uncles start getting,
They get mad at
they
you.
literally
Yeah.
start getting agitated
Yeah.
in the masjid. Like, brother,
Right.
we don't want to talk about that one.
Right.
Like, it's like, okay,
Mm.
okay.
Right.
We already know Arabic, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I don't need to, like, whatever.
Even as us as English speakers,
Yes.
we care less about English grammar.
Right.
It's like, man, it's just like this because.
Yeah.
Right? We don't
Right.
care about knowing why.
Right.
Right. But when it comes
No,
to
no, I
Arabic,
think this is different. I think most native speakers of English have somewhat of a grasp of English grammar. Arabic is like, because English doesn't have grammar, right? English is it has syntactic rigidity because of the
Yeah.
absence of rules, right?
Right.
Whereas Arabic is much more fluid than that.
Right.
And like to actually speak it properly is,
mashallah,
You have to know
you
grammar.
gotta.
it's like it's an exercise in harming your self-esteem.
Right, yeah,
To
right.
dip your toes into that pool.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You were actually using fiqh al-akbar as part of their.
Well,
And we were
right.
at the end. Yeah.
Towards as we progressed.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
mashallah, Sidi Yahya had reached a level where he was able to read al-fiqh al-akbar in
Yeah.
Arabic text
Right.
and translate it.
Right.
So why are we going to
Right.
continue reading like
Yeah.
Ja'at Maha?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah,
alhamdulillah,
mashallah,
it was nice
alhamdulillah, that's
to do
nice,
that.
man.
Right.
Yes.
And also receive the light
Mm-hmm.
of the
Ameen.
ulama who
Mhm.
who explained very beautifully what our creed was and what
Ameen.
our
Yeah.
beliefs are.
Ameen.
Mashallah.
Allah Ameen. Allah Ameen.
Allah Ta'ala
Ameen.
increase both of you and all of us
Ameen.
together.
Alhamdulillah, I mean,
And
And
it
that's-
is a path to struggle, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
It is a path to struggle,
Definitely.
to struggle
Oh,
to
yeah.
know,
That's it.
to
Yeah.
know
You
one
mentioned-
another.
You
Yep.
mentioned the fiqh al-akbar,
Mhm.
If one of our ulama, one of our akabir mashayikh from Deoband and one of our akabir mashayikh from West Africa and from China and from all the different parts of the world, if either any random two of them were dropped onto an island, they would instantly know one another.
That's incredible.
And it's the barakah of this Mubarak Quran that we mentioned that is preserved in those places, and once it's not preserved anymore, the ummah will fracture. It's the barakah of this Mubarak aqidah that we have, that we don't let anyone touch.
Ameen.
And if we didn't have it, you'll see that wherever it's gone, you'll see the ummah start to fracture. It's the barakah of this Mubarak Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the love of which is, what bring us together, whatever, African American, Filipino, or other,
Ameen.
miscellaneous,
Afro-Asiatic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, man. Afro-Asiatic, baby.
Alhamdulillah.
And
Alhamdulillah.
But you gotta struggle to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and not just to know, but to know each other too.
Absolutely.
We gotta
Right.
know, and I think once we get
Absolutely.
to know each other better,
Yes.
we can appreciate each other and where we come from.
Absolutely.
We
It's
can
important.
It'll be easier to sit with each other.
That's
You'll
true.
want to sit with each other.
Right.
You'll want to care for each other.
Absolutely.
You want to look out for
Absolutely.
each other.
That's true.
And ultimately, that's what brotherhood is.
I
May
mean-
Allah Ta'ala make us true
I mean,
brothers.
Allah Ameen. Allah Ameen.
All the way,
Allah
smiling
Ameen.
all the way to paradise.
Ameen. Allah Ameen. Allah Ameen. Allah Ameen.
this time it's the dua is like fallen in your lap, so we say Ameen, inshallah.
Ameen.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد
Ameen.
صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأحوال والآفات
آمين.
وتقضي لنا جميع الحاجات
Ameen.
وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات
Ameen.
وترفعنا بها عندك أعلى الدرجات
الله آمين.
وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير
آمين.
لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم سبحان الله رب العرش العظيم
Ameen.
الحمد لله رب العالمين نسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرت ولا هما إلا فرجت ولا دينا إلا قضيت قضيتها ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة هي لك رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها لنا يا أرحم الراحمين يا أول الأولين يا آخر الآخرين يا ذا القوة المتين يا راحم المساكين يا أرحم الراحمين يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث. Oh Allah, we pray to you and we pray to you alone. Oh Allah, the one who has created everything in existence, the things that we know and the things that we don't know. Oh Allah, we pray that you protect us and you guide us and you never let us go astray. Oh Allah, we pray to you and we turn to you in all situations. We pray to you that we are grateful and we are appreciative of this faith that you have given us. You have taken us from some of the darkest places. You have taken us from not knowing in ignorance to knowing who you are and realizing about your oneness and knowing who your beloved Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad is. Oh Allah. Oh Allah, we pray that we increase that knowledge. We pray that we are a source of spreading that knowledge, and we pray that every single person on the face of the earth can also have that knowledge. Oh Allah. Oh Allah, we pray that you protect our families and our communities and the entire ummah of Sayyidina Muhammad so that we can live in this life that we were supposed to as brothers, as people who see virtue and not those things which are trivial and meaningless. Oh Allah, oh Allah, that we see the things which are actually valuable, which is your consciousness, which is your knowledge, which is knowing you, oh Allah, and to have honor in your eyes, oh Allah. Oh Allah, we pray that we have purpose in our life, that we live our lives with purpose, and that we sacrifice for your sake, oh Allah. We pray that we always have this purpose in our life and it motivates us to do the right thing. Oh Allah, we pray that we don't allow these differences to separate us and divide us and make us hate each other. Rather, we pray that these differences that exist in our life actually allow us to appreciate one another and appreciate the beauty in one another. Oh Allah. Oh Allah, we pray that we can live in this life as brothers so that we can live in the hereafter as brothers. Oh Allah. وصلى الله على النبي الأمي وبارك وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.
آمين. الله آمين. الله آمين. الله خيرا. شكرا. الله خيرا.